Welcome to Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I welcome you to tonight's Zoom at 8. We try and start on time. So we've got a special guest tonight, as we always do every time we visit on Tuesday nights. But I do want to make sure that you know about Old Capital Lending. You know, we are a multifamily lender, but we also do other asset classes. And we're a little different than the rest of the mortgage lenders out there because we will bring other partners to the deal. And as you know, lenders are 75, 80% of the transaction. But how many of you need a sponsor, limited partners, asset manager, or an attorney, and so forth, and maybe even brokers? That's what we do. That's how we help you. So we're not a one and done. We are here to help you 1 through 50 transactions. So I'm so glad that you've decided to come and join us. It is a great night to network. All right. Well, it is time to go ahead and introduce our speaker tonight. And Eddy joins us every week. I swear I see him every week or on someone else's. Eddy is coming live from Hong Kong. I don't think anybody else can tell us that, 9 o'clock a.m. here he's ready to visit with us. So Eddy is an experienced ACAMS. That is the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists. He's a certified compliance professional with over 19 years accrued experience in AML, which is anti-money laundering. He's also does regulatory compliance, project management, and operation optimization. In his current position as Vice President of Anti-Money Laundering Division, Legal and Compliance, he leads a team of anti-money laundering specialists across multiple offices and countries, and he has designed the implementation for the company's anti-money laundering program. And he does this for jurisdictions, including Hong Kong, China, Macau, Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, and in the United States. Prior to joining the hospitality and casino industry, he was an analyst consultant in the financial industry, such as for companies with Credit Suisse, and the JP Morgan Chase in New York City. He currently owns 7 properties in Hong Kong, Macau, and China, mostly residential and converted industrial buildings. Eddy is also a limited partner in 831 units of multifamily apartment complexes as a limited partner, and eventually wants to become an active investor or general partner within multiple syndications. He also is an advisory company. He owns an advisory company in Macau to assist foreign investors to navigate in the multifamily space. And that's what we're excited about to hear from Eddy tonight. But due to lack of networking opportunities in multifamily meetup in Hong Kong, Eddy took the opportunity to be a leader in the real estate investment group called Multifamily Masters, which a lot of us know, and has grown to 5,000 members on social media internationally. Eddy is currently living in Hong Kong and Macau with his wife and 2 kids. He is also looking to grow his network in both locations to develop and work with a team of professionals to share ideas and learn from each other. So thank you, Eddy. Thank you for joining us every week. We so appreciate it, and coming to us live tomorrow morning, so you'll know what the future holds for us. How are you tonight?
Today? I am good. I am good. Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Excellent. We are so thrilled to have you. First of all, I want to know, what is Eddy? Can you tell us a little bit about who you are? We've heard a little bit about it, but tell us a little bit about how you got to Hong Kong doing money laundering.
Well, I grew up in New York. I originally born in Hong Kong, but I grew up in New York. So worked in New York, went to school in New York, went to public school in New York, and then went to university in New York. So I worked there in New York for quite a while, and 9/11 happened. Right, 9/11 happened. A lot of people got laid off. A lot of people got displaced. I moved into a consultant space at that point. So, doing regulatory work, doing project management, doing different things. And then, my family moved to Vegas. So in that sense, I went to visit my family doing in between my project. And I learned that, they have jobs in Vegas that is doing what I'm doing. So I went for an interview and I got the job. So they asked me, the balls are in your court. You want to move to Vegas or you want to stay in New York? So I took the dice and I rolled the dice and moved to Las Vegas. Next thing you know, I worked there for a few years. And then they said, you know what? Macau's opening up. Macau is a casino town in China. And this is the only place in China that casino are allowed to establish a casino there. So it's one of the biggest market for casinos. They asked me to move out here to kind of help out in different things. One area is anti-money laundering. So I started that department and kind of helped out in that area. And then I currently got recruited to this company in Hong Kong. So, and after 5 years in Macau, I moved to Hong Kong. So now I'm in Hong Kong, working in a cruise line business. So it's a little different, but it's about the same thing. But it's about implementation of AML programs and different compliance procedures.
Interesting. So with COVID, we've seen some big changes over in Las Vegas, Orlando. We've seen it. San Diego has some concerns, but how are you finding it in Macau with the casinos? Have we seen a drop?
Complete lockdown. So nobody's, I can't say nobody, but it's open to China. So for me, I can't go back to Macau without being quarantined. So I could come over to Hong Kong without quarantine, but I need to submit documentation, COVID negative tests, and everything else to get to Hong Kong. But get back to Macau, it used to be 14 days. Now it's 21 days. So I got 21 days of quarantine just to go back to see my kids. So
wow.
It's a nightmare. So, with that sense, right, all the casinos are closed because nobody will want to stay in the hotel for 21 days before they could go to the casino. So it's very, very difficult for casino to operate in Macau. Hong Kong, there's 14 days quarantine coming into Hong Kong for any foreigners. So it's a pretty messy, for the hospitality industry. A lot of business going down because of it.
So what about now? You're working for a cruise line. How's that working out? How's that? That's where it all started, right?
Yeah. So if you ask anybody on this call today, would they want to jump on a cruise today, right? No, right? You don't want to be trapped in a petri dish and get locked up in the cruise line and you got nowhere to go, right? So it's very difficult, right? Just like any other business in hospitality, it's very, very difficult to operate in this current environment. But our company, the company that I work for, they're currently operating a travel bubble. Travel bubble meaning that cruise to nowhere. So you get on a cruise and you just stay on the cruise for 2-3 days and you come back on to the place that they pick you up. So they operate in Singapore and they operate in Taiwan. So it's a travel bubble to nowhere.
So now do you work with the anti-laundering concerns on those ships then that correct. Traveling that way? Okay.
So I'm the AML officer for the company. So I'm responsible for all the ships, anti-money operations.
Yeah. So I'm just real curious. How difficult is it to launder money on cruises in casinos? I've got to know.
So in casino, in a proper situation, right? In a royal established casinos, with proper procedures and proper resources and proper, staffing and training, right? It's difficult, right, to launder money in the casino. If you're a criminal, it's not the smartest way to launder money through the casino. It's too slow, right? You think it's easy, you think it's fast, but there's so much more easier way to launder your money and elsewhere, right? But if you were to launder money through the casinos, it's a very, very slow technique. And it's not very, very sophisticated. People think it's easy. People think it's, prime target for money laundering. But in reality, if you have proper procedures in place, it's not very, very easy to launder money, especially, like if you're talking about a cruise line. Okay, if you're a money launderer, would you want to be stuck on a cruise line when you're laundering money? You don't,
Can't
right?
get
You
away.
can't get away. You're gonna jump the ship, right? So when you go back to the port, the police is waiting there for you. So
Gotcha.
it's not the smartest way to launder money through a cruise ship or a casino. A casino is a little bit easier than a cruise ship, but in reality, if you have the proper procedures and different things in place, it's not the smartest way to launder money.
So I have heard you talk about you're in multifamily and you were over here and you're an investor here. I'm very curious, and that's why I wanted you on today, because we have some stressed relationships within the community with China. I don't know if anybody's been sleeping for the last couple of years, but there are definitely some separations. And we also talk about a lot of money coming in foreign. So, Mike, what I wanted to do is kind of hear from you, your experience, what you're trying to get done over in China. A lot of people say, hey, there's all this money coming in. Can we do funds? Can we as Americans start relationships with people in China and start to really be an avenue of capital raising? So I really want you to take us through that, where you are, why you chose. I mean, you're in anti-money laundering, so you're very clear about what the limitations are and maybe how you put that in place for capital raising.
Correct. So in reality, right, a lot of individuals out here on this side of the world, they still have some interest in U.S. even with the trade war going on, right? But the most difficult part is for Chinese national, not for Hong Kong national, right? Hong Kong nationals in Hong Kong is a different banking system, and it's more international versus China, and there's no flight capital flight restriction out of Hong Kong versus China. So China has a lot of capital flight restrictions that's in place within the regulations of China law. So they do not allow to have foreign currency be transferred to a foreign country without applying for permits. So there's different things that is in place within the law and or within the banking system that don't allow this to happen. But like you said, right, there's a lot of money in the U.S. and there's many different ways to get money into U.S. if you're a Chinese national. So because I'm in the space of anti-money laundering, I need to learn about all this stuff, right? But because of what I learned in my day-to-day, I could kind of help foreign investor navigate this space on being on the compliance side on how to actually get money to the U.S. In a correct way, right? Without breaching any law, without having any problem within their local jurisdiction, or even on the U.S. side if they ever go to the U.S. So they don't want to fall into a space where they get into trouble on the tax side. They don't pay taxes. When they transfer in funds, they get into these hit lists or there's red flags for the banks where they start monitoring your banking situation, right? And it does it plays a lot to your tax strategy in your home country and the U.S. So that's the part that I'm trying to solve or help out foreign investors to kind of figure this piece out, because not everybody knows this information. Maybe everybody on the call knows here, right? But it's really difficult to kind of network with these type of people in Hong Kong, because nobody's doing it, right? And that's why I started a meetup, right? Because I can't find one. I try to go to a meetup in Hong Kong, I can't find one. So I said, you know what, let me just start one, right? And get like-minded people together and let's start talking and come up with strategy on how to solve these problems. Right. That's why I've been doing that here.
So what has been, what you're saying, what I hear you saying is Hong Kong has much better ability to bring capital in as opposed to China. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about if we wanted to make connections with people in Hong Kong, what would we need to be thinking about? How would we start communicating with them to bring over this? There's a huge need for capital raising here, right? That is one of the struggles that we find. And I'm always thinking about, okay, I need a relationship with somebody here that has a relationship over there. How easy is that to get that money from Hong Kong? You say it's open, but let's hear a little bit about this, what's realistic.
So the reality of it is raising funds is never easy, right? Just like the U.S., there's a lot of regulations. U.S. has SECs. Hong Kong also have regulatory structure to stop you from fundraising without proper license, right? So for you to raise funds, you need to align yourself with a particular individual that have a license to raise funds in Hong Kong, so they don't breach any local laws. I opened my company in Macau. So Macau also have regulations that, basically to not stop, but to permit or to license individual to raise funds in Macau. But the infrastructure on these regulations is not as sophisticated as Hong Kong. So Hong Kong has, a big infrastructures on the banking side and the financial regulation side and, the stock market, right? So is Taiwan, so is Singapore, so different jurisdiction between, in this area of the world, there's some difficulties in raising funds. So you got to have a license to raise funds, just like U.S., right? You need to be a broker dealer in the U.S. You need to have a fundraising license submitted through the local authority to make sure that you are licensed to raise funds for individual, because you're managing other people's money. So it's not easy, but you go through the process.
You talked about you have to have a license to invest over here. You said
to raise funds,
but you also said that you have to submit some not a license, but there was something that you were talking about earlier that said there was a certain amount of time you had to wait. And let's talk about that.
Okay. So for Chinese individuals, we're talking about China now, right? We're crossing the border to China. China and Hong Kong, different system, one country, two system. So within China, there's regulations to avoid capital flight, right? So any individual that is bringing cash of $10,000 crossing the border, they are required to actually get a permit, above $10,000. So permit is meaning you need to submit documentation. The Chinese banking system have to approve it, and then you could bring it over, right? If you don't do that, you're breaching local laws. Does that mean nobody do it, right? There's plenty of people doing it, right? There's plenty of people that's, crossing border with above $10,000, right? The transfer piece through the banking system, through the Chinese banking system, it's the same thing. But there's a limit to it, right? For foreign currency, there's 50,000 per person per year. So $50,000 USD are allowed to be transferred into U.S. currency or any other currency other than renminbi, RMB. So that particular currency, any currency outside of the Chinese currency, they have requirement. Anything above 50,000 are submitted or not no longer approved to be transferred, right? And if you're a company, there's no limit, right? But you still have to go through the submission of documentation to get approval for transferring funds. So that's the difficulty, and that's how some of these funds, get the how individual or company get their money into U.S. is through these mechanisms, submitting for permits, asking for approval, and then going through the regular channel. But there's always, when you speak to different Chinese investors, there's always different ways to getting money through. So there's the gray way and there's the black way, right? So the money laundering techniques that different people use to get their money through the system. And then there's always the gray system, which is, they call it the underground banking system. So there's many different ways to kind of get your money through, I don't condone it, but I need to learn about it. I need to kind of protect our company and protect myself, right? Because I'm building a company for myself. I need to protect myself to actually avoid being tangled into these gray area and the black areas.
So when I think about people, we're constantly talking about this foreign capital with negative returns, right? So these are very good opportunities to come over here. When we see this foreign money coming in, $1 million, $1.5 million, this would be the gray area, or this would be the black area? How does that happen?
So, it depending on the situation, right? I can't say it's the gray area. I can't say it's the black area. I can't say, it's the permanent way, right? So it's all depending on the situation. It's the typical lawyer response, right? It's basically depending on the situation. But in reality, people on the U.S. side, right? Syndicators, fundraisers, different people, they think that the money that's coming from, let's say China, right? Places like Seattle, places like Vancouver, places like California, places like New York, right? You see a lot of foreign money coming in, right? And, you get negative returns, right? You get negative cash flow in some of these projects. And why do they invest in it, right? You can't compete with that money, right? But in reality, they don't want to actually get a return. Getting a return is great, right? But it's to preserve the capital. It's to get it out of the system within China. Out of all the stuff that we just talked about, right? It's difficult to get money out of China without getting approval, right? So that particular process is difficult. So if it's a difficult process, then if you have, a area with least resistance, you get it out as soon as possible, right? So you dump your money into the U.S. market and you put it in the property, you preserve your capital, and it's not like they don't care for a return. They want to preserve their capital in the safe infrastructure, right? And if they need to move that money somewhere else, within the U.S. banking system, after you sell your property, it's so much easier, right? Once you get it without, with this capital flight restriction, you get it into a free market. That free market allows you to transfer your money around the world, right? Wherever you want it. It doesn't matter where it is at that point, right? You just have to get it out of the Chinese banking system, which, put a lot of restriction in place to avoid people from, leaving with the money.
I want to really go back and unpack that, because that is huge. I mean, I get phone calls all day long, Eddy, saying I cannot compete. I cannot. How did these people, again, I'm in California, and a lot of my money is leaving California. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to North Carolina. And this is, I just love what you said. They don't care if they get a return. That is really helpful for us to understand that. That is amazing.
It's also a tax strategy.
That capital.
right? Just like you, right? In California, you want to get it out of the California system. It's a tax strategy also, right? Once you get it out of the Chinese infrastructure, the taxing process is different, right? If you're a Chinese national and you're making your money in U.S., the Chinese system have no way to tax your funds, right? Have no way to tax your income, but you do fall under the U.S. tax system at that point, right? But there's
Mhm.
different things that you could do, to kind of limit your liability at that point, right? But it's a transparent process, right? It's not as opaque like different Chinese systems, right?
Mm.
There's different things that you cannot do, that's as transparent as, the U.S. Financial system. So that's why they need to get it out of that particular infrastructure and put it into a more transparent infrastructure so that they could understand and they could plan, right? They could reinvest and, make their money grow, right? In a different way, where it's a little bit more transparent. So.
Interesting. Really interesting. So can you share with us what that tax liability is on their money as opposed to like the taxes here? How does that compare?
So that's the difficulty part, right? Because depending if you have a business or if you're working, right, you own property, right? It's a little bit different in that sense, right? If you own business, you get taxed in a different infrastructure. So for individual that's working at a job, just like US, you get tax, income tax, but they don't take it out. You have to pay at the end. So for me, in Hong Kong, they
Oh.
don't take it out of your paycheck, right? You are responsible to pay your taxes at the end of the year. So you get to enjoy your money
Huh.
upfront, but you do have to pay at the end. So you usually at the end of the year, you got a huge tax bill. And then that tax bill, depending if you have a business or you have different things, you can limit that a little bit. But if you are just an employee, just like the US, you have no way to limit that. You just have to pay it. It's a big tax bill that you're going to have to pay. And usually people save up for it. So in the saving situation, in this side of the world, the saving rate is much higher, right? People save their funds, save their salary at a higher rate, than U.S. So usually they save enough money so that they could pay this tax bill at the end of the year. And there's also the financial system do cater to that. They offer low interest loan to individual to actually pay for their taxes at the end of the year. So that's definitely, literally, it's like free money at that point. You're getting a sub 1%, 1.2%, 1.3%, 1.5% on your money to
Hmm.
basically borrow out to pay for your taxes.
So in our case, and we have Mark Gross here, who is bonus depreciation guy and cost segregation. How do how if they've got these taxes at the end of the year, do they have something like that for bonus depreciation?
No, there's nothing like that.
Interesting.
That's a very different concept, right? Of course, there's accounting practice, right? But it's not the same methodology. You could take losses from your company and you could kind of deduct it, but it's not the same thing as like cost seg, right? Cost seg is very, very different versus this part of the world. Of course, there's expense deduction or company expense, capex, different things that you could deduct, right?
Hmm.
But it's not exactly the same thing, right? Cost seg is very, very different. But you build a business out of it, right? To kind of limit your tax liability. It's just like US, right? You build a business out of it to kind of limit your tax liability. And why do everybody open up an LLC when they start building their infrastructure? That's the reason, right? To kind of limit your tax liability. And in this side of the world, you could also do the same. And the tax rate is a little lower than individual tax. Sometimes depends.
So is multifamily something that is done over there? What are the advantages to keeping their money in China or in Hong Kong, just like we would have here?
So you can see it in my background, right? You see those buildings? Those
Yeah.
buildings in my background, that's Hong Kong central
Mhm.
area. So this picture is taken from the peak. So to give you perspective, one of these apartments down there, right? One apartment, I'm talking about 550 square feet to 800 square feet, right? That particular apartment will run you around $10 million to $50 million Hong Kong, right? So equivalent to almost 2 mil to over 4 or 5 mil, or even higher depending on the price of the property. And that's how much each property costs. So if you're talking about multifamily, right? So these buildings are multifamily, right? These are particular, developer built this building to build like a multifamily, but they sell it individually because it's so expensive to buy one of these apartment. And usually it's institutional size investment where a developer comes in and put a whole building there, and they build the whole building and then they sell it per unit. And per
Yeah.
unit could cost around 10 to 30 mil. So it's pretty expensive for Hong Kong.
So where's the ghetto? How do people afford that? Seriously, are you buying in the ghetto? Here we don't want to do that, but if you can't afford it, what does that look like?
So the ghetto is pretty bad, right? I mean,
Mm.
pretty bad meaning that you literally live in a cage. They call it cage home. So you don't
Um,
actually even have a bedroom. What you actually have is a bed space. And they rent that bed space for a couple of $1,000 Hong Kong, right? And that's what the ghetto is, for different individual that's living under the poverty line. They have to, live in these situations where they live in cage home. One bedroom, the size of 100 square feet, you could live three people in it. You built three bed space, and then you rent that bed space for an individual to live in. So that's why, real estate is one of the most expensive living expense for most of us. But in Hong Kong, it gets pretty ridiculous. And the Hong Kong government try to, the best of their ability to kind of help out by public housing, but that public housing list, you have to wait literally 10 years to buy a home. So yes, so it's subsidized, but it's pretty crazy to kind of get that type of assistance.
That's intense. So I'm building an understanding of how intense the situation is over there and why you would want to invest here, and even just for to preserve your capital. Very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about how do we become Eddy Wong's best friend so we can get some money out of there and get to our deals. How does this work? How can we partner?
So for me, right, why I started this and why I attend so many meetup, right? COVID happened, right? COVID
Mm-hmm.
happened, and we're all sitting at home, right? We're all thinking about ways to kind of move ahead, right? And we're all sitting at home trying to figure things out. So what I did was I sat at home. I started talking to different people. I started figuring out what I need to do. I started talking to lawyers in US, in Macau, in Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, right? And trying to figure this process out because I see a problem, right? Real estate prices are really expensive in this part of the world. We're
Mm-hmm.
getting 1 to 2 cap rates, right? So, why do people still buy out here, right? People buy for appreciation, just like the coast, right? California, New York, people buy
Mm-hmm.
for the appreciation. But that's not a sound strategy, right? It's not a good strategy for investment, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
buying and praying, right? right? Hope and pray and hope it goes up. So, what I want to do is I want to build a business out of this to solve this big problem and help foreign investor invest in US so that, they could get cash flow, right? Nobody even heard of cash flow out here, right? Unless you paid, $5 million upfront, for a property, right? Or $10 million upfront, buy it outright, and then you could collect, your rent, and free and clear, and then you can make some cash flow, right? But majority of the time, because property price is so expensive, people got to take out a mortgage, right? And a mortgage, just like your area, is very expensive, right? The interest rate is high. Well, it's not high, right? I can't say that the interest rate is high, but you got to pay a lot of money upfront as deposit, and you got to, maintenance and upkeep and different things. You got to pay a lot of money. So why I want to build this is I want to help some of these individual outs, right? And everybody in this part of the world is all about working, right? Their working life is their life. They don't have any other life. They come here, 8 a.m. in the morning, 9 a.m. in the morning, and they work till like 8, 9 o'clock at night. And they go home and they hang out with their kids for half an hour. And then they go to sleep, right? They eat and, they go to sleep. And this is everybody's life, from individual driving a cab to individual that's, working for a prestigious law firm, right? Managing partner of the law firm. This is the lifestyle of everybody in this part of the world, because everybody works, long hours, and it's difficult. And I want to kind of build this to kind of, there's another way, right? You might not need to work, your whole entire life and have nothing, to achieve at the end of it. And I want to build that for myself. So I want to talk to different people in this part of the world to kind of assist them in that. And, give them another way, right? And show them that there is another way. And, multifamily doesn't exist in this part of the world, right? Because property prices are so expensive.
Yeah.
But if I tell them, right, everybody on the call knows, you could get a property for, 5 to, 2 to 3 to 5 mil, 10 mils, right? Depending on the property size. And you could generate, substantial cash flow from it, right? So in that sense, if you were to buy 1 or 2 property in Hong Kong, but you buy it in the US, you get substantial cash flow. It could replace half your income or your full income. Then you don't actually have to live this life anymore, right? You don't have to actually, go to work forever and just work, right? And that's why I'm trying to change the mindset of different individual out here.
So I think that it gets frustrating. Let's just be real. It gets frustrating for Americans that have been working hard on these investments to try and get in a deal, and they keep losing it. How can we work together so that doesn't happen, so that we're not losing deals? You're able to keep those prices, keep those, maybe, instead of not having a return, but rather preserving the capital that is in that property to be consistent with other properties in the area so that everybody wins. I think that's probably one of the concerns with having this foreign capital come in, because we become disadvantaged as Americans, right? And so, I think that there's great opportunities to help you work with us over here to get into a deal, right? I mean, I think,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how would we do that? How would we get a hold of Eddy Wong? What would be the steps that we could do if we wanted to capital raise with Eddy Wong? Are you prepared at this time to bring over 200,000, 300,000, 1 million? Where are you at?
So I am building the infrastructure to kind of go through the process of, funding these projects. So I'm doing it with my own funds first, right? I want to test out the infrastructure to kind of go company to company. I've been investing with my own bank account in Asia here and U.S. bank account. But I also built a company in the U.S. I also have an LLC in Wyoming. So I'm trying to utilize that vehicle to kind of invest in it. So the infrastructure is being tested for myself first. But once I get that part all ironed out, I'm having different lawyers in this side of the world to kind of review different contracts that I'm going to build, put together for individuals and different companies to kind of invest in US. So yeah, once that is set, there's no limit, right? There's no limit on how much I can bring in, right?
Yeah.
It's just finding an investor, finding the right project, finding the right individual that's interested in a particular project that you guys offer, right? You guys are the boots on the ground. You
Yeah.
guys are the people that's gonna actually put the deal together and working with people like Julianne, right? To get the fundings and get it together. But it doesn't go full way, right? You got to bring some capital to the table. So the one piece that I could actually assist is to kind of cover that rest of it, right? You bring some of your own money, or you work with somebody like me or a different individual to kind of raise funds to kind of put that project together. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to work with different individual on the U.S. side as the boots on the ground.
This is excellent. I get asked all the time, can you bring in 5 million? Can you bring in 10 million? And at some point, when it gets to be about 15 million, then we get into, some of the larger funds that are out there. But simply the 5 million, the 10 million raises can be challenging. And you have to go to separate different people, and they've got their own, fees and stuff like that. At this time, I know you're using your own capital. If someone were interested in using Eddy Wong for one of their deals, what would we look for you? How much could we get to work from your fund?
So on my side, right, I can't safely say that I could raise 5 mil off the first shot, right?
Okay.
So I could safely say I could do it below a mil. I think I
Okay.
could do it somewhere in that range. In that sense, by talking to different individuals in this part of the world and U.S., right? I'm not going to shut out U.S. I also have a lot of friends on the U.S. side that's interested in these projects, right? So I could kind of do the mix, start raising funds on the U.S. side and start raising funds on this side of the world, and then put it all together and come up with that project fundings. So that's my
Excellent.
plan. My plan is to kind of work on both sides of the world.
That is so interesting. I would like to open it up to the group to find out if there's any questions. We've got a couple more minutes.
I have a question. Julie, this is Rick.
Hi, Rick.
So what do we as syndicators or sponsors of that deal need to do or need to be aware of in terms of accepting this foreign money? I know Eddy and his team has to do a bunch of stuff that will satisfy his government, but we would also need to do something from our end. Do we know about that?
So the main thing is for you, right? You want to make sure that it's coming from a U.S. banking system, right? In that sense, it covers your risk, right? Once it's in the U.S. banking system, it provides you some type of insurance that, the fundings are vetted by the banking system before they accept the funds. If it's coming from a foreign company or foreign banking, then you are, the ultimate person. But the bank will still do the review, but you are the ultimate person that's accepting the funds. So basically, you have to, utilize third party. You got to utilize different companies out there to ensure that the individual, do your KYC, right? Know your customer, right? Do your KYC to make sure that the funds that you're accepting are not tainted in any way. so that you are not tied to a situation where, there's an investigation that's brought upon through the financial system on your syndication. You don't want that while you got enough on your plate while dealing with syndication. You don't want another investigation on top of you because your fund is tainted. So you make sure that you do your research and understanding who the money is, where the money is coming from, and who's it from, right? There's these things called sanctions. There's things called PEP, which is politically exposed person. Any individual that's working for a government entity or a government position that has authority, they pose a high risk to you accepting funds. So you got to make sure that you know who you're dealing with.
I'll say, even from like a Freddie standpoint, we will lend to a foreign national. There are some things that we're going to need, like a place where somebody would reside when they do come over here. But if they've got a green card, they don't have to have a green card. Actually, they can just have permanent residence here. They don't have to live here. They do have to have somebody that would be like the process service person, where they would have the ability to get legal documentation to them. They need to maintain a balance in their checking account or their U.S. bank of 5% of the loan amount. And, it's really not any different. The liquidity is the same as it is here. We would underwrite it exactly, that person underwrite them exactly the same. So it's pretty open to be working with folks outside of the great nation of the U.S. So I know that there was another question. Mike Lawrence, you had a question.
Yes, thanks, Julie, for putting this together. Eddy, let's say that I establish a relationship with a Chinese national through some social media. They come to my YouTube channel, they hear my podcast, they reach out to me, and we develop a relationship. Is it within the legal realm for them to go open up a Taiwanese bank account, and then we make the transaction from a Taiwan bank account over to the U.S., or is that considered the gray market that you've talked about?
So Taiwan is different. Taiwan is not China. Taiwan is a different banking system similar to Hong Kong. So if they could get their money through the Taiwanese banking system, then, like I said to Rick, you are responsible to, vet the customer, make sure that you know who you're dealing with, and you don't fall into the sanction space, right? When you fall into the sanction space, you cannot do business with these individuals that's on the sanction list. And those are usually, tied to, terrorist financing, different individuals that have ties to these organizations. So if you don't fall into that space, and they could get their money through the banking system, usually you're okay, right? But, in everything else, you have to take precaution, right? You need to do your due diligence. You need to make sure that the person you're dealing with is the person you're dealing with. A lot of different individuals, especially in this part of the world, they utilize infrastructures in, tax haven space, right? You got BVIs, different locations where you open up different companies, and you can't find out the person, the original source of funds. You don't know who's actually responsible for that company, right? So that's the part that's difficult, and that's the part is it's difficult to comply to, right? When they start investing with these vehicles, it's difficult for you to have that understanding on who you're actually dealing with. So you gotta make sure you know who you're dealing with.
I just have a follow-up question behind that. Let's say I was willing to put the time and effort into coming to China on a recurring basis, like annually, which is actually part of the plan that my wife and I have. I'm learning Chinese. I want to learn how to speak Mandarin. And is it realistic for me to be able to set up a Chinese bank account as a foreign national inside that country, or is that like completely like out of realm of reasonableness.
It's not, right? But you have to abide by a lot of local requirement. Opening a bank account as a foreign national, first you need to have a resident address. You need to have a reason of you opening up an account. You can't just open an account because you want to. In addition to that, because you're a U.S. citizen, when you're opening up these bank accounts, it goes through a long process of approval. It's not the usual, 1 or 2 days. It takes weeks and weeks. And, for me, right, for me to open up a bank account in Hong Kong as a company, first I have to go through the registration process of opening a company. That's why I'm not doing it in Hong Kong, right? Because it's so difficult. First, you got to go through the registration process to open up a company. That takes, a week to 2 weeks, maybe even a month. Once you get all that done, then you got to go set up an appointment to open a bank account. And that appointment will go about 3 months, 2 to 3 months for you to get an appointment to open a bank account. And once you get through submitting all this information to the bank, it takes them months to review your application to make sure that you have legitimate reason to open up a bank account in Hong Kong or these other jurisdictions, right? Like Taiwan's and different place. And then you got an establishment of opening a bank account. So in many different ways, it's very, very difficult to kind of go through this process. You could do it, don't get me wrong, right? You could definitely do it if you have a resident address, you have a legitimate place of business, you open up a company, but I can't say it's an easy task. It's a legitimate way to do it, but it's difficult, right? And sometimes it takes, maybe a year to kind of, get everything kind of worked out, which a trip won't get you, right? You make one trip out here and then you wait another year, you need a 2-year process just to open up a bank account and set up your business. And sometimes, that timing doesn't, enable you to kind of, make the process smooth. So that's the difficulty.
Excellent.
It's not that it's impossible.
That was amazing, Eddy. You are so knowledgeable about this. It's invaluable information, and
I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for myself, and that's why.
But you're helping a lot of people understand. So I've got one other question, and then we're going to break out in networking rooms. So, what is the current status of the EB-5 program?
So the EB-5 program is the foreign visa, investment visas, for individuals to invest in U.S. and they get a actual visa to come to the U.S., right? But in that status of that, right, it's very, very difficult, especially for Chinese nationals, right? Even if they invest $500,000 to $1 million, they submit it through the program, it takes them 10 years to actually get a visa to come over to the U.S. So, just like everything else, right? It's not that it's impossible. It's that it's very, very difficult for individual to actually achieve their goals. I'm not saying that is something that nobody does, but a lot of people are interested in it, right? Because they still see a way to kind of go to the U.S., even though it's 10 years, 20 years, in play, but, they have a way, right? Instead of being stuck with, just staying in China or just staying in one location, they have a way to get out. And that's why they do it, right? Mm-hmm. The EB-5 program is built for that, right? Even though it's a long line, a lot of different individuals. I looked into it for mother-in-law, right? Mm-hmm. And they said because, it's Chinese national, it takes a long time for them to get through. And sometimes it could be up to 10, 15 years to kind of get through the system. For Hong Kong individual, it might be different, but because of this trade war, Hong Kong individual might be treated the same exact way now. So that part is still up, to be seen. We don't know yet for sure, but yes, it's a difficult task.
Amazing. Well, Eddy, if someone would want to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Please connect with me through LinkedIn. So I put it up on the chat again. Just connect with me with LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get to me. and then maybe we could set up a call, to kind of talk about particular details, about your deal, what you guys are working on. For me, I focus on the team, right? I focus on the jockey. I want to make sure that, we got proper individual that is running the syndication. You got a deep bench, and you got different individual that's working in that sense where, the deal is not going to fall apart, right? So that's my biggest concern when I'm working with a partner that's boots on the ground.
Excellent. Well, that's fabulous. I thank you for joining us tonight. It's been amazing. I do invite you to stay with us and network, so everybody can visit and hear a little bit more about Eddy Wong. So thank you so much.